Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending tonight's workshop. My name is Eddy Cumins. I'm the Smart General Manager. And before I begin, I want to turn it over to Director Sackett to say a few words and welcome everyone on behalf of the Smart Board of Directors. Director Sackett?
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Mary Sackett. I'm on the SMART board as a representative for Marin County. And I'm joined tonight as well by Director Barb Parr. And I think that's the directors who are with us. Really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. SMART has shown record ridership growth and has been leading the Bay Area transit agencies in recovery post-pandemic. And we know we have more work to do. So I appreciate all of you taking the time tonight to come and join, to share your ideas, your thoughts. I feel like ridership is that place where there are small things that we can do that don't always cost big dollars, but can really change people's perceptions about how to get on the train. What are those connectivity issues that we need to solve, and connecting with employers and just letting people know about what an opportunity is to get out of your car and to get on the train. So thanks for being here tonight. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. And I'll turn it back to General Manager Cumins.
Thank you, Director Sackett. I appreciate that. Next slide, please. So here's tonight's agenda. We'll go over some workshop ground rules. I wanted to talk about the strategic planning process a little bit and the timeline. Also wanted to highlight some of our prior planning activities. Wanted to highlight a few things that we heard back in 2022 during our ridership listening session. And then specifically for tonight's workshop, we'll look at and want your feedback. We want to hear from you in regards to future strategies to increase ridership. And then we also want to get your input on service coordination. And then, of course, at the end, what we want to do is open it up for discussion where we can hear your thoughts and ideas at that time. Next slide, please. So we'll start with just a few ground rules. When you wish to speak at the end of the presentation tonight, please use the raise hand feature. To raise your hand, go to reactions and click raise hand and keep your mic muted until you're called upon to speak. Ask you to stay focused on the question at hand and keep an open mind, be respectful of others' ideas. We want to hear from everyone and be considerate and allow time for others to speak. We're not going to have a clock here tonight, but we're asking folks to keep their comments to approximately 2 minutes. Next slide, please. So we will be doing some voting tonight. Voting's the wrong word. Collecting data and input from a program called Mentimeter. You do not need to download an app or anything like that for this. You can do one of two things. If you're using a cell phone, you can scan the QR code. That'll take you to Mentimeter, or you can go to menti.com on your desktop or your phone and type in the access code 66395016. And as we go through the presentation, we'll open it up and be able to use this technology to not only collect, but also to document the data and the things that we hear here tonight. So I'm going to just pause for just a minute or so, allow everybody an opportunity to get Menti set up on their systems.
While Eddie's pausing, I just want to let the group know also that in the chat here in Zoom, there is a link that you can click that will also take you over to Mentimeter.
Okay, we will go ahead and move forward. Again, that link is in the chat. So next slide, please. So just a few things. Just wanted to go over and talk a little bit about what the strategic plan is. Strategic plan helps define the strategic direction of the organization. It helps us establish our goals, objectives, and actions in line with SMART's vision and mission. It promotes collaboration, collective responsibility, and accountability. The last plan that we had was the 2019 strategic plan, and that was adopted in November of 2019. This plan needs to be updated every 5 years. That's what we're working on here tonight. And the product that we produce towards the end of this year will be the 2024 strategic plan. Next slide, please. So as we go through this process, we will refine our objective areas. We'll establish goals, strategies, and actions. Ultimately, we will draft a strategic plan. And then the plan is to take the final strategic plan to the board to be adopted in probably December of 2024. And again, that will become our 2024 strategic plan. That'll go from 2024 through 2029. Next slide, please. Here's the timeline. Many of you, I see a lot of familiar names on the screen tonight. Many of you attend our last session where we went over the SWOT analysis and reviewed our strategic objectives. That meeting was on January 31st. We're here tonight in February. We're talking ridership. In a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about pathways. And then in March, we have 2 more community workshops where first one will be talking about extensions. And I believe it's like March 27th, we'll be talking freight. In the meantime, we're having a COC workshop that's scheduled for March 13th, 2024. And once we start to collect this information, the idea is to get this out to the community. Myself and other staff members have the opportunity from time to time to get out to speak to groups. And we plan to take this information out, provide updates, and collect additional feedback, from the public to make sure that we're looking at everything. We'll do that through August. There's also another COC workshop scheduled for August 14th. And then September and October, additional community presentations. We'll be working closely with our Citizens Oversight Committee as we've gone through these workshops to start drafting the strategic plan. And then the idea is that the COC will finalize the draft 2024 strategic plan, and then we will take that to the board for approval of the 2024 strategic plan. And again, that is likely to be at our December board meeting. Next slide, please. So as we get started, just wanted to talk about some of the prior planning activities that we've done here at SMART. Obviously, we have our 2019 strategic plan that was approved in November of 2019. When I first arrived, we did some additional strategic planning where we went through and did a SWOT analysis, really identifying the agency's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We also did a series of listening sessions. We did one on ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight. And all of that information was collected, and ultimately the SMART Board of Directors created what we internally refer to as the SMART House that identifies our values, our strategic objectives, our mission statement, and our vision statement. And I think on the next slide, we have a blow up of that SMART House. Again, this shows our values of safety, integrity, stewardship, and continuous improvement. Our strategic objectives, ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight. Our mission statement, there was a lot of conversation about what is SMART's purpose, what is our mission, and simply, when it was all boiled down, it was we connect communities. And then our vision statement was smarter transportation for a smarter future. Next slide, please. So what did we hear when we talked about ridership in 2022? What did we hear? We heard things like we need to make sure that we have reasonable fares. There was a lot of conversation about first and last mile connections. There was talk about alignment, better alignment with transit providers in the area. Station and train comfort was important. More train service. Overnight parking was seen as a barrier at the time. We talked about train reliability and schedule reliability. Safety is always a huge concern. Talked about onboard amenities and the need for clear information when utilizing the transit system. Next slide, please. So from those listening sessions, from that strategic work that was done in 2022, there was some strategies that were set forth. There was conversation. One of the first strategy was a microtransit pilot program at Airport Station, additional train service looking at midday, later, and event service. One of the strategies was to extend the Giants game service through 2022 season, improve bus and ferry connections, overnight parking at smart park and ride lots, aggressive marketing plan. One of our strategies was to monitor ridership and adjust as necessary. We wanted to model the rail system to determine 30/60 headway requirements, support bike share at our smart stations, and look for innovative methods to restore snack bar and Wi-Fi. And I think many of our riders and people who pay attention to smart on a regular basis realizes that a lot of these items in our strategy list have been implemented over the past couple of years. So what are our results? Well, in the calendar year 2023, we served a little over 750,000 riders. That was our highest 12-month period ever. We surpassed our calendar year 19 ridership by 4.5%. We set all-time monthly ridership records in 7 of the 12 months during calendar year 2023. We achieved our highest ridership recovery rate in the Bay Area, 10 straight months. And our second highest we had the second highest commuter rail ridership recovery rate in the country. And we carried over 100,000 bikes in calendar year 23, and that was 32% higher than 2019, which was obviously a new record. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're getting into tonight's, to the meat of tonight's workshop. And want to start off with this first one of just an open-ended question. And the question is, and this is where you need to pull up your Mentimeter if you haven't already. The question is, what strategies should SMART use to increase ridership? This is great. I'm seeing a lot of good things in here, seeing a lot of things that I would have anticipated, seeing first and last mile. Very bold, see some adequate parking in here. Seeing free days. I think there's a lot of other things about first and last mile that kind of relate to that. Seeing better connections with buses, better connections overall, more bike capacity, adequate parking. 3 days is becoming bold. Target large user groups, covered bicycle parking. Frequency of service. Better connections. Later night service. That's something similar we heard in previous listening sessions. It looks like we're getting close. I think we have 29 people in the room. I assume most are using Mentimeter, so I'll give it just another minute. We have 22 so far that have submitted. Seeing several in here with more bike parking related. Get the word out, marketing, advertising. Okay, it looks like looks like the updates have slowed. So this is great. I really appreciate this. And now what we're going to do is we'll go to the next slide. And we've come up with some categories that I think represent some of what we heard in the list in the open question, represent those areas. Okay, so the next question for Mentimeter is, how should SMART prioritize these strategy areas and click each to rank in the order of importance? So whichever one you think is most important, click that one first. Whatever you believe is the second most important, click that one second, so on and so forth. So let's do that now. Looks like first and last mile is at the top right now, followed by local transit connections, which are similarly related. Train schedule adjustments, system completion, marketing and outreach. Schedule is moving up. Schedule moved down. I think this is interesting to see and just highlights the importance of those first and last mile connections, as well as how the train connects with the bus system and the ferry system. Just about another minute. Looks like most have come in. We have 19 responses so far. On the previous one, I think we had like 22, so we're getting close. Okay, well, it looks like our start coming in. So just seeing the rank on there, first and last mile connections is at the top, followed by local transit connections, train schedule adjustments, system completion, marketing and outreach and communication, service reliability, stationary amenities and parking, reasonable fares, system safety, and onboard amenities. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So as we all know, and I think it's highlighted in some of the previous information we received in those results, is SMART is part of the transit system in Sonoma and Marin counties. And I'm happy to report that SMART is currently working with Marin and Sonoma County Transit Agencies, TAM and SCTA and MTC, on a comprehensive service plan covering the two-county area. Our goal ultimately is to optimize service and facilitating the best trip for transit riders. Agencies have agreed to develop a comprehensive service plan focused on the 101 corridor. That's what we're looking at right now. And the project kicked off in January 2024. We anticipate this will likely take somewhere between 12 to 18 months. But since we're here tonight, and we're talking about ridership, we've already highlighted the bus connections and the ferry connections and the first and last mile challenges. I thought that it was important that we ask a few questions that highlight not only how people use the SMART train, but how they use other services as a part of the system. So can we go to the next slide, please? So this is our next Mentimeter question. Do you use public transit in addition to SMART to travel along the 101 corridor? And in this one, you can select all that apply. Just waiting on a few more. Looks like a lot to the Golden Gate Ferry, also some to the Golden Gate Transit System. 17% of those reporting are saying they only use SMART. And this is great to see. It looks like most of us use transit. Nobody has said that they do not use public transportation. Okay, I am not seeing any more come in. So can we go to the next slide, please? If you said yes, which most did, said they use some form of other transportation services or public transportation services in Sonoma and Marin counties. We just, excuse me, ask you to provide some additional information, things like route, time of day, trip purpose, really anything that you would like to share about how you're using transit along the 101 corridor. We'd appreciate it. So we can do that now. Receiving a lot of good feedback in here. People are talking about using the ferry. If the transfer time is good. Special events to San Francisco via the ferry. A lot of ferry comments in here. It's great to see. Mostly on weekends. That's not surprising to me. We see a lot of transfers, a lot of ridership on the weekends lately. Larkspur, Marin Farmers Market. Trips from Santa Rosa to San Francisco. A leisure rider, talking about using it for recreation. Visit Sonoma and just ride the train. Usually weekend use in the Giants. Leisure trips. Katati to the airport. Petaluma to Larkspur. Oh, wow. UC Berkeley to Petaluma, BART from downtown Berkeley to El Cerro del Norte. Take the 580. Bus to San Rafael Transit Center, take SMART to Petaluma, or take BART to San Francisco, ferry to Larkspur, SMART up. Great. San Francisco to Petaluma. Farmers Market again. SMART to visit family. SMART to the airport. Use SMART with my bike. A lot of people do. It's very popular. And SMART Petaluma to San Rafael. Just wait a couple of more minutes. We have 17 responses so far. This is really great. I really appreciate all this feedback. This is great. Sometimes from Petaluma to Santa Rosa when schedule makes sense. Often bike instead of train. Schedule doesn't align. Always looking for excuses to ride the train. Me too. Katati to downtown Santa Rosa. Sometimes Petaluma. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you. It looks like our responses have stopped coming in. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so our next question is, what are the biggest obstacles to using transit for trips along the 101 corridor? And we're asking on this particular question to pick your top three. Select your top three. Can't get to my final destination, 33%. That's really highlighting first and last mile challenges. Schedule is highlighted at 25%. Followed closely by can't get to transit from my house. Again, that's first and last mile challenges. Lack of parking at 2%. Fares come in at 2%. Just another minute. Looks like we have had 18 responses so far, so I'll give it just another few seconds. That's interesting. We are seeing a trend here. First and last mile connections are really being highlighted. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. This is our last Mentimeter question tonight. What improvements would make transit along the 101 corridor easier to use? And again, on this one, we're asking you to select the top 3. Okay, results are rolling in. The dead heat between more frequent service and better connections between transit services. Or late evening service is up there. Frequencies currently leading at 22%, 23% now. Just a couple of more minutes. I'm seeing that 4% of the responsive that come in at other. If you could use the chat feature and type that in if you want to speak on it when we get to public feedback session, be happy to hear about that. But if you want to just type that into the chat, we can document that because I would be interested to understand what other is and what your concerns are and what are some other things that maybe we should be looking into? Okay, it looks like the responses have stopped. More frequent services at 24%, more late evening services at 20%, and better connections between transit services came in at 16%, followed closely by weekend service at 14%. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate that feedback and your responses. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we're getting towards the end of this. I want to open it up for people to speak and to share your thoughts and your comments. Just please remember our the rules we talked about in the beginning. Raise your hand to speak. Keep an open mind and be respectful of others and allow time for others to speak. Again, I just remind you and request that you keep your comments around 2 minutes. So with that, we will open it up. First, Eris Weaver. Eris, please.
Hi, thanks,
your
Eddie. A couple of thoughts. I have to say on answering some of the questions, I'm not entirely sure how first and last mile is different from transit connections, but you don't need to answer that right now. And I also would very much like to hear from whoever said that bike parking was a problem. It wasn't me, because there is bike parking at most of the stations, including the bike lockers. However, the one time I actually needed to lock my bike securely at a station, the bike lockers weren't working. So I don't know if that's where that came from, but I'm interested to hear what that person's experience was. I do frequently interact with people at the stations who can't figure out how to buy a ticket and use the machines and don't feel like there's enough information there for people who aren't very tech savvy. And then the other thing that struck me, if everyone who's on this call uses smart and some other, and mostly using some other form of transportation, it seems like we're not the people that who, who we need to be asking. Right? We need to the people who don't use transit or use the train, and why they don't is seems to be who we need to talk to. I mean, the one I hear the most is that it doesn't go when somebody needs to go. But which is actually, if I don't use transit, that's the reason why it doesn't go where I go when I need it to go. But that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Eris. You know, I think simply put, you know, the difference between first and last mile connections and first and last mile and connections is simply it's possible. It's just not a good connection, right? So we all know what first and last mile is. It's getting to where you actually need to go. But those connections it's not necessarily attractive if you can do it, but it's a 45-minute connection, right? Or an hour connection. That's not, people don't see that as beneficial. So that's the difference between those two things. And the other thing I noted is, you know, you're right. You know, one of the challenges, and I've had a few people email me about that, about, you know, getting other people besides, you know, our current writers to be able to attend these meetings to provide feedback. That is always a challenge of just getting people to take the time to do that. I hope to get a lot of this information though, as we go out to the community and start sharing what we're doing with our 2024 strategic plan and be able to get some of that information. But the flip side is we all have neighbors and friends, right? You know, do they use the train? If not, why? Right? And we could collect some level of information from that about how we could better serve that particular customer base. So with that, we'll go to our next speaker, Steve.
Yeah, I live in Santa Rosa, and the bus connections are unreliable. So I have to drive, and there's no place to park downtown. So I usually go to the North Station and park in the parking lot, and that's a pretty long walk. So I would really like to see Santa Rosa turn into a hub similar to the one that we have in at the south end in San Rafael, where all the buses circulate around the train, and ideally the buses would all arrive at the station 5 minutes before the train leaves, and leave 5 minutes after it arrives. Now that's a tough one in Santa Rosa because they already have a hub someplace else.
Right.
But that hub does not connect us to SMART satisfactorily. So maybe a sub hub at Santa Rosa might help. Maybe this is just a long range thought.
Yeah, thanks. And Steve, we will share some information with you. We have worked with the city of Santa Rosa for some parking in the downtown area, so we can share some of that information with you. So next speaker, Danny Sheehan. Danny?
Hi, I had a little trouble navigating between the Menti and the Zoom. I don't know if that's because I'm on a Mac or what, but my only comment was I think that a hindrance for me is the midday gap. I can't easily navigate 3 hours between one train and the return train. So I just wanted to kind of make that comment. Everything else works for me.
Great. Thank you for that information. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to speak? Patrick, go ahead.
Good evening, Eddie. Thank you again for the great session and all the good work by you and the SMART team. Real pleasure to be here with you. So my comments are directed kind of, and all of them, the feedback and these comments are directed to increase smart ridership. Like, how do we increase smart ridership? And so
Yes.
my suggestion is our suggestion, I'm Patrick Seidler with WTB TAM. And our suggestion is to have a model station for the first and last mile, and to really focus on reducing vehicular miles traveled and documentation of that, increase ridership. And then, as I mentioned in the last meeting, to come up with game theory incentives for large potential rider groups or bases. So the one I keep referring to is the Civic Center, Northgate, and Autodesk down at the Civic Center station area, and go to those large user groups to try to get them to use smart, and then augment it with that first and last mile or shared bicycle ridership, share biking, to get folks up to the Civic Center or to Northgate and work on those projects. And WTBTM thinks that the Civic Center station is a real prime opportunity to be a model station for the first and last mile, because there's not that much more to get there. And really on Smart's side, the only capital expenditure would be to build the smart parking lot that Smart's had on its books since 2014 on the east side of 101. And what that would do, if you kind of look at all the other plans that are going on there, it has those first and last miles after that parking lot's built. It signals to Northgate that Smart's in the game and that they have people there. But there's really a connected network of pathways and walkways that are there. And with the smart parking lot, there's actually a lot of parking in that area, but that parking lot would draw more people there and get them to the correct side of the freeway. And then covered bicycle parking at the stations for the shared parking or the bike share. And the bike share can't get on the train. So in other words, they use bike share, you got to leave the bike at its station. You can't bring it on. And then last but not least, the free ridership south from the Civic Center station to the ferry terminal. Because what that does is, you saw that the feedback on the number of people that use it with the ferry pulls about 40% of its people from the north. And so what that would do is it would pull people out of their cars earlier, and it would stop them from driving through Marin County and stop them from parking down at Larkspur, which is the biggest traffic generator in the afternoons. And it would reduce vehicle miles traveled through Central Marin ferry terminal, which is the biggest traffic generator in Marin County. So what we think is, with the very small investment, that it would signal your investment partners that there's a multimodal approach and system to the smart station, and it would really work well together. And you'd have that model that you could share in a short period of time of how to build out some other stations for the first and last mile model station. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that information. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I know that in the last meeting, we talked a little bit about, in the SWOT analysis, that one of the threats maybe being remote work and people not going through and commuting at the typical times. And I'm wondering if there's a way to kind of incentivize remote workers to take the train at off times during the day, maybe highlighting, coffee shops or public places to get work done along the route, or increasing the frequency of trains that maybe go on the off-peak hours. I know I'm often looking for excuses to take the train, places to go to get out of the house. And, when I see that there's a train coming, I'm more apt to get on it. But when I see those big gaps in the middle of the day, it kind of throws things off. But I think there's a real opportunity there to kind of connect with folks who maybe aren't going into an office as frequently as they used to, but they still want that feeling of getting out of the house, and maybe a somewhat simulated commute on the train certain days of the week.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. We heard something similar to that in 2022. We did add some level of midday service, but there is still that gap in midday. So I appreciate that information. I see a meeting attendee number 3.
Yes, my name's Valerie White. I somehow was Julia Gonzalez for a long time.
Oh,
Now it says, I think you had 4 Julia Gonzalez's. That's okay. Oh, there it is. Valerie White.
Valerie
I
White,
have a
gotcha.
question about the little mini bus service at the airport.
Uh-huh.
Wondering about the service area. The service area includes many wineries that are southwest of the airport, but it does not include Larkfield. So that seems to me that
I lost you, Valerie. Are you still there? We're not hearing you. There
I'm
you are. I can
unmuted.
hear you now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Huh. Okay. Well, I want to ask a question about the bus service that is at the airport station.
Yes.
The map shows that the map for that bus service includes many wineries that are
Oh,
We lost you again, Valerie.
serving wineries for that doesn't include Larkfield.
So Valerie, we didn't hear everything that you said. You were cutting, your audio was cutting in and out.
Okay.
I think what I heard though is essentially, and I want to be very clear that there is a different service area for the Smart Connect at Airport Station on the weekends versus what it's able to do during the week. And so what you're referring to, I believe, is that hits several wineries on the weekends, but doesn't make it over to Larkfield. Yeah, we just kind of wrote out of what we believe were the destinations. If you want to throw something in the chat of destinations you think that we should take a look at, really what we're considering in that is making sure that whatever service area we set up, the vehicle has time to hit all of those areas and then make it back to the train to get people back on the train, so to and from. And so that's what we're looking at, is making sure that the vehicle can do its work and make sure that it's making its connections back to the train. But if you want to put some information in the chat or contact us, and I will provide a link to share additional information. It's definitely something we can take a look at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Hello.
Odin, go ahead.
Okay. I travel between Petaluma but we Santa Rosa dinner. There's
Odin, we're not hearing you clearly.
That isn't me. That's somebody else that was unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I had a few comments. Adding on to what Valerie was saying about the Smart Connect shuttle, out in that Larkfield, Whitgift area. A possibility is also connecting the shuttle to the Sutter Hospital and on Marquis Springs Road, which is a large employer, and that's also right next to the Luther Burbank Center for the Arts, which can also be a trip generator with its events. So that could be a possibility for increasing ridership around that area. And on the topic of remote workers and bringing back those business people, bringing back Wi-Fi on the trains is definitely a good thing, especially for remote workers being able to be in meetings and do work while riding. And also just increasing the weekend and midday service, which especially the weekend service is very infrequent and makes it hard to plan a day around the train.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I took some good notes. Would anyone else like to speak? Samantha.
Hi, so I support the customer service desk, and I just wanted to comment about the Smart Connect service. So we've been getting feedback that the Smart Connect runs a little too early and starts a little bit too late for some of the flights going out of Santa Rosa. So that might be something to consider that could increase not only ridership for the train, but also ridership on our Smart Connect for people wanting to make that connection as well. I know personally I planned a trip for the end of this month, and I really wanted to use that Santa Rosa, the Smart Connect to use the Santa Rosa airport, but unfortunately the only flights that were available were late at night, arriving at my destination at midnight and leaving Santa Rosa around 7 or 8 p.m., which is after the service hours. So that might be something to consider for the future.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you, Samantha. Anyone else? We have about 9 minutes remaining. Anyone else wish to speak? Jefferson.
Oh, hello. It wasn't my original feedback, but I noticed that someone mentioned having a possible food truck event. And now that I was thinking about that, I think that could be a really good idea. I've noticed that there's like a fair amount of space at each smart station, whether it's set aside for parking, vehicle parking, or bicycle parking. And I think if maybe once a month, that parking could be set aside instead for food trucks, or maybe other businesses could set up tents to kind of advertise to riders. And sorry, by having kind of like food truck events, like food trucks at every single smart stop, I think it could have like the effect of having like a quote unquote like food tour between Marin and Sonoma counties, just so that people living in the area, as well as people that take smart regularly, could kind of just be tempted to, even if it is just taking the smart from one stop to the next, just perhaps like having that enticement of food would be enough to encourage people to take at least one ride on the smart. And if we are kind of doing that outreach to local businesses could also advertise their presence at smart events. And so in that way, they could also speak on behalf of smart and attract new riders that way, possibly.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Valerie?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you great now.
Okay. Well, so speaking of ridership, what's your plan for Cloverdale?
Keep working towards extending there.
I know, but do you have any specific plans, or is that like in the long-term future?
So it's funding dependent. I mean, the way that we are approaching this, right now we're under construction on Windsor. We've made significant headway on Healdsburg. So Healdsburg will be our next station. And then the plan is to continue extending to the north, but that is funding dependent. I get asked on a regular basis, give us a timeline. That's very, very difficult for me to do. I can tell you that the staff works very hard on trying to close that funding gap on a regular basis. We're focused on it. But it's very difficult for me to give you a timeline that I could tell you this is when it's going to be. But I can tell you it's actively on our mind and something we're working towards, but it's not easy.
Thank you. I figured that the federal government, did most of your money for Healdsburg come from federal government money recently?
No, we got some is federal, a large portion of it is state.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great evening. Would anyone else like to speak? We have about 5 more minutes. Last chance. Tim, go ahead.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear you great. Thanks.
Great. Fabulous. And sorry, I had to jump off for about 20 minutes there. So this might have already been brought up. I work in tourism for my day job. And one, love smart, but two, would encourage smart to think a little bit more like people who are unfamiliar with transit. Right now, you're preaching to a lot of the choir.
Yeah.
At the ferry connections, for example, not a lot of information at the ferry building or at the ferry terminal about how to connect to smart, like literal signage saying how to do it, or even information with the staff there on the ferry. Also, when you get off the ferry, not a lot of information on how to walk to the smart station unless you know how to look for the signs. People tend to be right-handed. You come off the ferry boat, there's no signs there. You have to look very clearly to see how to do it. You can put some stuff on the sidewalk that directs people to it. And then also connections. This is from my own personal connections to Sonoma would be wonderful because I live not too far from your soon to be most northern station. And I would really love to hop off in Petaluma and then go to my office in Sonoma. That might be a dream, but that's what I would really love. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing. Looking forward to the pathway presentation next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Lucy?
Hi, thank you so much for hosting this meeting series. I'm the UC Berkeley student who takes SMART, does the whole public transit patchwork to including SMART to Petaluma on the weekends sometimes. And I was wondering if you could please talk a little bit about kind of what's involved with improving the bus connections, especially with Golden Gate Transit, where it's going through more than just Marin and Sonoma counties, and kind of what some of the steps are involved with that. And thank you so much again for hosting these meetings.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, I can speak a little on that. I mean, right now we're going through the planning study where we have all of our planners working together and taking a look at things and seeing, taking a look at travel patterns. Some of the questions that we ask here tonight about how people are using the system, we do have information, of how many of our riders, what they transfer to, those who are using Clipper, we have that kind of information. So I think it's really about coordinating and trying to figure out what connections need to be made. What's the appropriate timeline? What's the time that people need from getting off the train to get to the bus, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different things that go into that, but that's what our planning teams are working on now. A lot of good work is happening. They're looking at the entire 101 corridor, but obviously we are well aware of how much we're linked to Golden Gate Transit, both with the bus and the ferries. And so that will be looked at extensively, and we're committed to improving those connections in the future. Tim, are you back up, or did you just not put your hand down?
Oh, sorry. I don't think I put my hand down, but I'm on my phone and someone else put my hand down, whoever's controlling me. Please.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
You're all good. Would anyone else like, thank you, Lucy. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, well, thank you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so, I really, really appreciate all of the input and feedback that we've received here tonight. I hope everyone knows we want your participation. We want your input. If there's something that comes up or something that else you would like to provide, we'd encourage you to send us something on the online comment form at the address listed there. What's next? We have upcoming online community workshops. All of these workshops will be from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. The next one will be Wednesday, February 28th. That'll be workshop number 3. We'll be talking pathways that night. On Thursday, March 14th, workshop number 4, where we'll be talking extensions. And then on Wednesday, March 27th, will be workshop number 5, where we'll be talking about freight. And so, as previously mentioned, spring and summer 24, we'll be doing ongoing community outreach. Fall of 24, we will draft a plan and do some public workshops. And then in the winter of 2024, ultimately, the board will approve the final strategic plan for 2024. Next slide, please. So with that concludes tonight's workshop. Again, I want to thank everyone for attending. We truly appreciate all of your input and feedback. Thank you very much, and everyone have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.